see you. Oh, thank you. He's quick. It's nice to see you all and welcome this evening. I think there are a few empty spaces. We haven't had any apologies, but maybe they're late. I know there's a lot of traffic around today, so we'll just get on by first reading the emergency evacuation announcement. So there are no planned fire drills, so if the alarm goes off, please leave the building in an orderly fashion through the nearest fire exit. Please use the fire exit through the main doors of the hall or the fire exit in the storeroom adjacent to the stage. The fire assembly point is the island in front of the main entrance to the building. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please switch off mobile phones or turn them to silent, and please note that the meeting will be live streamed, so please ensure your microphone is switched on when speaking and you speak clearly into the microphone. I'd just like to acknowledge the presence in the audience of Councillor Constable over there. The minutes, I'm going to item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of August. If you've had a chance to read them, could you note them, please?
Noted.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any declarations of interest tonight? No? Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over now to Emily Ewell. She will present the report on the Code of Conduct for Councillors, local investigations and determinations from July to December 23.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I'm pleased to present this report that sets out the 5 complaints that have been received since the last reporting period, and there is one more that was held over from the previous period that's now been dealt with. There were 2 further complaints where the Code of Conduct was not engaged, and I thought actually it's quite important for us to look at those separately, because there are cases where people contact the council to make a Code of Conduct complaint, but it doesn't actually meet the criteria of being a Code of Conduct matter. So I thought it was quite sensible that we show those separately. With regards to the 6 that are included in Appendix 1, you will see that 2 of those have resulted in no breach of the code, 2 are currently under investigation, and the final 2 are under initial assessment because at the time of writing the report, they'd only just recently been received. I've also provided some additional information in the body of the report about the nature of those complaints and where they have come from. And also the committee asked me to make a comment about whether there were any trends in the complaints. So were there any concerns that were being identified around patterns of behaviour, that kind of thing. So I've made some comments about that in the report. Chair, I'm very happy to take any questions, but I will just remind members that, of course, confidentiality is key with regards to standards complaints, so I won't be able to go into any specific details of any individual complaints. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for adding those comments. Are there any questions?
Can you just, Emily, go through the process of investigation of a complaint?
Yes, Chair, happy to talk through that process. So once a complaint is received, it first undergoes an initial assessment, and part of that assessment is to see whether or not the Code of Conduct is engaged. So was the councillor acting or reasonably believed to be acting as a councillor at the time that the alleged behaviour occurred? And is it something that can be dealt with the Code of Conduct? Once those 2 questions are answered, I would then look at the complaint and decide whether I can resolve it informally. So it might be something that just needs an informal resolution, or it might require further investigation. And at that point, I would usually send the complaint to the councillor that's been complained about to ask them for their response. Depending on what that response may reveal, the complaint could be resolved at that point, or I may refer to our independent person to to determine whether further investigation is required, and this could be calling various witnesses or taking further witness statements from the complainant and the subject counsellor. If at any point in that process I feel that there could be a breach of the Code of Conduct and I want to make a determination of a breach, at that point I must consult with the independent person before making that determination. And then the final part of the process is if there is, if it's a significant issue, so perhaps very serious behaviour, or if I'm not able to resolve it, so perhaps the counsellor that's being complained about doesn't accept the recommended sanctions, for example, the matter can then be referred to the Standards Committee.
So we could be the ultimate arbiter of whether that person is in breach of the code and the further sanction that might be applied.
Yes, typically the role of the committee is around the application of sanctions as opposed to the determination of a breach or not, because that's done by the monitoring officer in consultation with the independent person. However, the committee could suggest that I've erred in my determination and make an alternative recommendation, but that's not normally the process. It's normally about what sanctions should be applied.
Thank you. Are you happy with that answer, Councillor Sharp? Thank you.
Very much so, thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for that. If we can go to item 7. Oh, I'm really sorry, Christine.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we ought to take some positives from this. Excuse me. 6 months, 6 complaints, and we have 39 district councillors. And I can't count the number of parish councillors we've got. So although it's regretful to see any complaint, it's also a positive to see that we are receiving a few and they are being positively dealt with. So I'd like to compliment the monitoring officer on dealing with them, because it's a difficult and it's a balancing act. Despite the fact there are regulations and rules and guidance, there's still people involved. But I do think as a council we should look at this and say, well done. That generally speaking, it would seem that there is a acceptable level of respect between members and the people that they represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy.
I'll second that.
Yes, me too. Thank you. Item 7, as you remember, we set up a training working group, and Richard was chair of that, and he's going to give us now a verbal update on its progress.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the Standards Committee working group was held on the 6th of December, commenced at 10 o'clock. First on the agenda was the appointment of the chairman, and I was appointed as the chairman of the committee. Second on the agenda was the terms of reference. Terms of reference were noted by the committee. We then went on to the members' training programme. On the training programme, prior to the working group committee, a questionnaire was sent out so that we could actually ascertain whether the training was right and proper, and the responses we got, albeit minimal, there was a lot of concerns regarding the new councillors mixing with existing councillors and not getting the direct one-to-one or direct training that they actually needed. It was noted and was going to be actioned by Sonia Worthington, who's now no longer with us, to make sure that any previous training, that the trainer was very much made aware that there was new councillors on the training group, so they should be prioritised over existing councillors. There was discussion also regarding whether existing long-term councillors had refresher courses rather than attending the full training sessions. That was to be determined, but unfortunately Sonia's moved on. So, and even though I tried to get the information prior to that, it's something which we can actually look at going forward. the member survey was actually very interesting responses from it, and I do believe that Sonia, prior to going, did actually put it out for all members to actually see the responses for that. On the training program, there was a consensus that we should be starter and refresher training for licensing appeals and the development training. It was, however, emphasised that the timetable was tight for training, and consideration should be given to having one session for starter training and one for the refresher training, with those unable to attend sessions being asked to watch the recording of the training. This was so because obviously those two in particular are very much in depth, and while the training sessions were going being presented, there was a lot of, yes, we did that last year, or we did that a year ago, and the new councillors weren't being able to get to grab exactly what the importance of the roles of both of those committees. So it was decided to actually put the emphasis on the new councillors to make sure that, you know, you're elected in May, you have to learn very quickly on some very important issues and subjects. So it's important that the consideration is given to those new councillors. The working group agreed that the programme for 24-25 should contain all the subjects that were covered in 23-24. All subjects were necessary for newly elected members. Namely on them was meet the corporate team, which is obviously the first thing that we all do. We go along to the council office and meet the officers who are going to be working with over the next 4 years. Constitution, rules and debate. There was a discussion of possibly that's not one of the most important things to actually learn first, but we discussed it fully cross-party and did come to the conclusion that it's one of the most important things that we actually do discuss, because we're run by the Constitution. So, but it is a very large document to actually look through and understand, and particularly this year. For next year, obviously there's going to be changes within the Constitution, so it's imperative that we all are able to explore that as soon as possible. Codes of conduct and standards, obviously very important, and thank you, Councillor, for your views on that. Yes, it is very encouraging to see so few codes of conduct. So it's either Emily's dealt with them very efficiently, or there's not been that many coming forward. I'll take the former and say that Emily's dealt with them very efficiently. Introduction to planning, massive one, and obviously with what's happening in the country at this moment in time, and also what's happening locally. But again, it's very in depth to actually understand the planning issues. And for you experienced councillors that have been doing it for a long time, obviously you know it's took a few years to actually come to grips with it. But yeah, it's very interesting. If we're taught in the right way, taught in the right manner, then we can actually understand very quickly what the needs that we need to come forward to our various committees. Chairing skills, that's a massive one, because for those who are not used to public speaking, excuse me, those who are not used to presenting and sitting and standing up in front of people, chairing skills is very important, because you might have the skills to be able to do the job, but unless you can actually present it and actually ensure that the members in front of you, or your committee members, are actually not all having a free-for-all in front of you, and you chair it properly, it's incredibly important. Scrutiny, licensing, appeals, obviously all very important. Data protection, GDPR, again, incredibly important, because you know we're councillors now, we can't just start blurting out information regarding our residents or against our fellow councillors. Overview of local government finance. Again, that was one which was discussed and said, well, is that really relevant, important? And yes, incredibly relevant, important that we understand the monies and the finances that we're dealing with, and where we're getting the money from and where the money's going to. Safeguarding, Again, it's a very relevant subject. I've been on 2 or 3 training courses on safeguarding. I hadn't got a clue what that was until I went on the training courses, but yet again, it's incredibly relevant, if nothing else, for ourselves as councillors. Public speaking, dealing with the press. Now that's a good one. I didn't realise I was so popular until I became a councillor, and all the local press ring you up and literally, I would love to speak to them freely and say what I believe, but unfortunately they have this translator that what I say and then what they write sort of like gets translated somewhere along the line. So it's very careful that we actually work as teams and effectively check each other's work to make sure whatever goes out into the public is actually true and factual, a record of what we said. Development committee, well, it's been an interesting few months so far on that, on some of the issues that have come forward. But again, training is imperative on that we do it right. One of the biggest issues that did come out, and it is, as I said, it's something which we'll work on going forward, is new councillors against experienced councillors, because we did, during our training sessions, did sit there and the amount of times it was, oh yeah, John, do you remember that case of whether it be a taxi issue or licensing or whether it be development? And then a discussion would ensue regarding what happened, and it's not really relevant to the training that we were given. So what we're trying to do is actually look at ensuring that that does not happen going forward. The working group was in favour of details of the new free LGA e-learning platform being included in the induction programme for the newly elected members for 24-25, and also circulated to all the members of the council. The working group approved the following dates, which I won't go through, for training in 2024, but they have been circulated to the members. The training survey was circulated to all members, and it's been communicated to group leaders prior to being circulated. To all members, we also circulated the action point from the working group, and we will be holding another meeting on the 29th of February to discuss this prior to the next standard meeting. That is the conclusion of my report. There's an awful lot more, but I've tried to condense it. I'll just say thanks to Councillor Sharp, Sperring and Lawman. It was a very positive cross-party working group meeting in respect to the training. We took a lot from the experienced councillors and the new councillors, and I think it will bode well for our training for the future. Any questions?
First of all, thank you for all the work that you've put into this. It certainly looks very comprehensive to me. Question is you mentioned some training videos and also e-learning. Could you please have a look at if any of that could be made to parish councillors and parish clerks, so we have a better understanding of the work you do?
Yeah, that was actually discussed. The exact details of the contents of that is something which we have requested will be circulated to all councillors, whether it be district, town or parish.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Linden. Any other questions?
Christine.
Councillor
Thank you,
Mason.
Madam Chairman. Not so much a question, but more observation. I accept what you're saying about the differential of the learning curve for new and experienced councillors. And I think that is covered actually in the development committee training to some extent. But I think one area where that would not be helpful to be split would be in licensing and appeals. That's a statutory, quasi-statutory, I'm not quite sure, but it's a committee that has its roots of learning in law. And it probably seems the same because the law hasn't, to my know, changed recently. The law has been the same. However, it's a requirement that every year before the councillors sit on that committee, whether they've attended it the previous years, that they go through the same training, because we need to have a robust committee and hearing panel. So I'm sure Emily will correct me if I'm wrong, but I do feel that that is the one area where you do need all the councillors together, because you would hopefully giving exactly the same report. Development Committee, although it is quasi-statutory, has variations, and I accept what you're saying, but that is one area I would just say caution, if I may. And we have got excellent trainers in that as well, in-house.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. No committees are going to be, no training is going to be split. It's just the emphasis on the training is going to be to the new councillors, instead of the existing councillors kept on jumping in and saying, yeah, we know about that, and talk about their experience. It was talked at length, Councillor Sharp, Sperring and Lorman with their experience. It was talked at length. It was talked about splitting. It was talked about refreshers for the experienced councillors, but it was totally agreed that it would not be split, and for those very reasons that you said, but it was more a case of the trainer, instead of going off on a jolly and having a cup of tea and reminiscing about a previous case, sticking to the task of doing the training for the new councillors, whilst also taking the experience of the existing councillors, which is incredibly important. But yeah, I hear your concerns, but there was absolutely, it was discussed and decided, no, it would not be split. It would go forward as a all members training.
Thank you for the reassurance. I'm pleased to hear it. And I do think it's important that members, I think the emphasis is right. The training should be on new members, but it's also important that members learn from each other and cross-party. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. And thank you for your report, Councillor Linden. Did you want to come back on that, Emily, on Councillor Mason's comments?
Thank you, Chair. Not necessarily in respect of Councillor Mrs Mason's comments, but I think it's probably sensible for me to just refer to the support for the member development programme. Councillor Linden's alluded to the Principal Democratic Services Officer, who has supported this programme so far, but has now obviously left the council. And it's just to provide reassurance really to members that there are other members of the Democratic Services team and myself who will be picking this up and looking to develop that programme, flesh it out, and then bring it back to the working group and then onto this committee for approval. So at your next meeting, you'll be able to see a programme set out which will clearly delineate the the mandatory training versus the kind of optional training, and also present you with a blend of training options, which will include e-learning, but also face-to-face sessions, and also remote sessions for those that prefer that method. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions regarding the item? No? Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you, Councillor Linden, and all those who are on the working group, and for the work you're doing and will be continuing to do going forward. I think, Emily, you won't be at the next meeting, will you? Oh, you will. Okay. I won't say thank you for anything, except for tonight, for you and Vicky, for your help. Thank you. It is 8:57. And I'd like to 7:57 and I'd like to close this meeting and thank you all very much for coming and for your comments as well today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for